All right. Well, we are hot. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. We are Tuesday, September 8th. I hope everyone had a good Labor Day, all us working people. Our presenter today, our guest, is Mr. McHale with Quintillion, and Quintillion is our subject today. Broadband and installation of infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure. So Mr. McHale is a telecom and broadband industry veteran with 35 years in the telecom space, having worked with IBM, AT&T, MCI, Hawaii Tel, as well as several startups and, as he calls them, fixer-uppers. He has built and operated and maintained broadband network systems all over the country and joined Quintillion just under 2 years ago as their Chief Revenue Officer, responsible for sales, marketing, business development, and external relations. Mac is located in Anchorage, but does split his time between here and Washington, D.C. All right, well, Mr. McHale, the floor is yours. I'm going to go ahead and bring up your presentation.
Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. As Jomo said, my name is Michael McHale. People call me Mac. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Quintillion, based here in Anchorage. I've been involved with Quintillion for about 2 years now, and I've really made a career out of telecom and broadband, and I've built networks, both fiber, microwave, various flavors of satellite, all over the lower 48, including Hawaii and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I've had leadership positions since the early 90s in companies like IBM, AT&T, MCI, Hawaiian Tel, like Jomo said, a number of startups and fixer-uppers. So it's really a pleasure to be with you all today after a long weekend. And today is also my birthday, so another year logged. I try to forget those, but we'll keep coming anyway, no matter what you do. So we have a brief presentation here, and Jomo mentioned to me that this group is kind of casual and flexible, conversational. I'd love to keep it that way. I have enough structure here to guide us through in a logical way, but I'm open to dealing with any questions, comments, ideas, anything like that along the way. So. Let's go to the next slide, Jomo, if we could. I'm just seeing the cover slide right now, by the way. I'm not sure if everybody else is seeing something different.
Should be the overview slide.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the one with the fiber optic cable laying on the seafloor.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, sir. There we go. Better?
Yes. So I will go through our products and services, going to give you an idea for the network, spend a little time going through our investors, and introduce you to our management team as well. So in a nutshell, and we can jump to the next slide, Jomo, if you could. In a nutshell, Quintillion is a wholesale network service provider. We are involved with customers. Some of the household names that you'd know right off the top: Alaska Communications, Alaska, Aztec, ASRC, DRS, and folks like that. So we essentially sell broadband transport in the form of Ethernet private line, Ethernet virtual private line, and on a symmetrical and asymmetrical basis. So the network runs from the Seward Peninsula in Nome up through Kotzebue, Point Hope, Wainwright, Barrow, Aliktok Point, and then down through the interior of Alaska on a terrestrial network. It's a very, let's call it a robust network. It includes 10 terabit capacity in each of those landings that I mentioned, but also can be increased to much more than that. the system is easily upgradable to 90 terabits. I'll put that in perspective. So any one of the landings, the cable landing stations that we have in place today, are capable of really carrying all the traffic generated in and out of the state of Alaska at any one time, and with some capacity left over. So the network is really, I'd call it built to last. I mean, our subsea network is buried pretty much 12 feet under the seabed floor. And our landings, that network is buried 60 to 80 feet from a mile offshore into the cable landing stations. So the way the system works is, we deliver this high capacity network, a broadband network service into each of these landing stations. We deliver it to customers like Alaska, Alaska Communications, and then they distribute it on their local access networks throughout the markets. We also have opportunities to build what I'd call wireless aggregation points at each of our landing stations. So we don't have that in place today, but if you could imagine at each of those cable landing stations building an industrial strength microwave tower to aggregate traffic from around regions back into a robust cable landing station that's all fully fiber optic, full fiber optic network and all the capacity you could ever need in areas like this. So can I hold and take a question or two or clarify anything at this point? Or should I just keep?
If anyone has a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. I am monitoring the chat box, or you can just go ahead and take yourself off mute. Okay, appears we're good to go, sir.
Well, Jomo, this is Doug Isaacson. I do have a question.
Please.
And I appreciate it. I'm actually doing this off of my phone, so it's different than the laptop. But Michael, I appreciate the description of who uses your network, but I do have a question to figure out. It is out in Minto, we're trying to develop businesses that use internet, and our service providers are basically DRS, GCI perhaps, and United Utilities. Would these be the channels we access you, or is it not yet accessible that far off the trunk line?
I think that we are, well, two-part question there. So one, are those the entities that you work with? Yes, DRS, we have an active a master service agreement in place, and we're delivering services through DRS currently. We have, my understanding is the GCI and United Utilities are the same company, or one is, UUI is a subsidiary of GCI, or am I thinking of the wrong entity there?
No, I think that's somewhat right, but they work independently.
Okay. We have a master service agreement with GCI as well, although they have not purchased any services from us at this point. But we are all contracts and all the paperwork is in place for them to do that if they choose to do so. So the other issue is, I would tell you that if you have needs that are not being met by your current local access providers, we're open to talk to anybody who's looking for a solution, because we can sometimes get creative and figure out ways to deliver service, even if it's, it may not be using copper or coax lines that are currently existing in the markets, but we can do some sort of a 4 or 5G wireless fixed wireless broadband solution as well. So, we're open to having those conversations. We're also always looking at funding opportunities from entities like the Rural Utility Service, which is a division of the USDA. And there are typically a number of grants and low-cost loans that are that are available every year. And so always looking at that. And a lot of times what it takes is it takes a partnership, service provider and a municipality to get together and decide, let's go ahead and figure out a way to bring broadband to these areas. And oftentimes the federal government will help fund some or all of that capital expense to do that.
Right. So do we talk to you or a sales team or who would we talk to?
Talk directly to me, and I can direct from that point.
All right. I
We're
appreciate
a very small company, by the way. We're like a dozen people at Quintillion. We do have quite a bit of contracting and consultant help, but for the most part, it's a very small group. So I'm kind of chief cook and bottle washer, and everything in between as well. So I'm happy to directly address whatever issues. So Jomo can distribute my contact info, and I just suggest everyone feel free. Pick up the phone, send an email. We're happy to get engaged and help however we can.
So that's a good high level first things first. Again, my first hearing of Quintillion and my frame of reference is for installation of that large fiber optic line, which you all have access to quite a bit more capacity and different means of distributing information, collecting and distributing information. I'm sorry,
was that a question?
Yes. But I believe the answer was yes, because it was right there on the first slide.
Let's go to the map if we could. I think that's a good picture for some. Yeah. So this is broken down into phases. So I'll walk through, where we're currently at today with phase 1, what's going on in phases 2 and 3, and there's lots of moving parts within those phases. But I'll try to break it down and help everybody understand what we have today and what is coming down the pike. So currently, we're providing the services I mentioned: Nome, Kotzebue, Point Hope, Wainwright, Utqiagvik, and down to Licktock Point, and then down through the state on a terrestrial network. So the network from Nome to Utqiagvik is about 1,200 miles, and then the terrestrial network down through the state is about 500 miles. As I mentioned, it's buried 12 feet below the seabed, and then on the landing 60 to 80 feet below the seabed. That's all in place today. And like I said, each one of those landings has enough broadband capacity to service all the broadband traffic going in and out of the state multiple times over. So the challenge for us is distributing it, from those landing stations out through the communities. But again, working with partners, that effort is moving pretty well. I'll give you an example. In Nome, we have a partnership with Alaska, and we launched that about a year and a half ago. And Nome is a fairly small market. I think we calculate there's probably 900 to 1,000 homes that are broadband prospects or that actively utilize broadband. In a year and a half, Alaska has picked up somewhere close to 600 subscribers on the system. And what we did was we provided them a non-oversubscribed service. So what that means is, man, I'm not sure. Like in my home in Anchorage, I have 100 meg service from a prominent provider, and when I do a speed test on that, I typically get about 30 megs, and maybe 5 o'clock in the morning I'll get 100 megs, or something close to what I'm paying for. What we did in Nome is we just opened that pipe up completely, so everybody who's a subscriber there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they'll get, if you got a 25 meg service, 25 megs down and 3 or 5 up, that's what you'll get 24/7. So the network has operated in that phase 1 really error-free since we went live in December of 2017. We have had some outages on the network, but they've all been on the terrestrial aspect of the network and not the subsea portion. So that's phase one, and I'll go into a little more detail on the terrestrial network in a subsequent slide. But phase two, we're looking at an expansion right now. We're working on joint build agreements with various hyperscalers. Hyperscalers are companies like Facebook, Microsoft, AWS, and folks like that. And we're looking to build a network from Washington State to Japan, and land in Wada and then distribute throughout various regions in Japan. We're also including a branch unit in that in order for us to connect up to Shemya Island and then back into Nome, which would create a ring around Alaska, through deep water. So phase two is we are like I said, it's not 100% off the ground at this point, but we are working joint build agreements with a number of prominent players that will help share and defer the capex cost of the build, and that's phase two. Phase three comes in two versions of what I'll call 3A and 3B. 3A is a build from Aliktok Point to Tuktoyaktuk and down into Inuvik, where we connect into existing services and then connect down through Canada, back into Washington State and Oregon, and across to the East Coast of the US. So 3B will then take that network and carry it on to Thule Air Force Base, onto Reykjavik and London. So that is in a phase that's just behind phase two. We're working on those joint build agreements as well, and the funding for that. So some pretty exciting stuff. The notion here is let's connect Asia to Europe through North America, and basically have a three continent connection here. Low latency, high capacity. Something that would appeal to carriers, high frequency traders, and the hyperscalers as well. So that is the in service and what's planned at a fairly high level. Over the next, those phase two and phase three are, those are 2-year builds. And phase three may even be more than that, maybe a 3-year build. It's, as you can imagine, it's not like laying fiber, down an avenue or a highway. It's a little more complicated than that. So especially when you're talking about going through the Northwest Passage and places like that. So that is the system from a visual standpoint. On the terrestrial side, you can go to the next slide, Jomo. On the terrestrial side, it's about a 500-mile network that basically parallels the Dalton Highway corridor. We have a number of repeater sites down that link, and those repeater sites can be used as aggregation points as well. So we're looking forward to continuing to make distribution from our current network simpler, easier, whether it's using wireline or wireless technologies. So you've got the same high bandwidth and low latency capacity down the terrestrial network. And what you don't see on the map, and what I really didn't talk about much, is we have an infield fiber network as well that connects to the Kaparic and out to Alpine. And we'll pick up and support the Willow and Pika developments as well.
Mr. McHale, we have a definition question. Can you define terrestrial network?
What I'm talking about, the difference between subsea and terrestrial. The subsea is obviously, wet plant. It's out in the water. It is, as I mentioned a number of times, it's buried deep. It's in steel sheath cable, double armored, so on. The terrestrial network is network that is built on land And in this case, our network begins in Lickdock Point and terminates in Fairbanks, and that is all underground fiber built. And then we connect to existing systems in Fairbanks, and we ride those systems down to the lower 48. Does that answer the question?
Good for me. I'm looking to see no follow-up. Okay. I did have a question on this slide, sir. What I understand high bandwidth. What's low latency?
Low latency is essentially how quickly the system responds to you. So, 50 millisecond turnaround, 100 millisecond turnaround is typically, something that's desired for, gamers and folks who are, interacting with the internet, and not just looking at emails or other sort of passive applications. So it's, basically the network is wide open, it's dedicated, it's capable. And when I say wide open, that's not to suggest that it's not secure. It is very highly secure. But when you nail up a dedicated connection, that connection is is for the business or consumer's use, and it would not be oversubscribed or multiplexed in any sort of way. So gamers, for example, they're looking for as low a latency as possible for interaction with whatever system they're. I'm not a gamer, so I can't even talk about that. But so that is the definition.
Okay, so effectively, but again, we're kind of experiencing a bit of it right now. The fact that we're discussing this remotely, almost instantaneously.
Well, video applications are fairly low bandwidth. I mean, a lot of folks think that they're high bandwidth, but they are, in reality, they're pretty low bandwidth. But yes, I mean, this is just about real time. So.
And again, as to gaming, it becomes more critical simply because, again, it's reflex based. And so you don't, the lower the latency, the better.
And we've had
response.
Folks in Alaska, we've had complaints that latency in Alaska is, it's not the same as, if you're living in the Bay Area in San Francisco and you're 2 blocks away from an internet peering point, you're going to have lower latency in that scenario than you are in Alaska. So, that's another thing we need to look at. Is there a way for us to get a virtual internet pop in Alaska at some point? Something that can then further reduce latency, which we'll always be working on. Always working with the folks at Microsoft and AWS and so on to, see, when can we start looking at, building and operating data centers here in the state. And a couple things as we're, moving into kind of more strategic interests. We're in the process right now of building a ground station for satellite operators in the CX, K bands in Barrow. And we have a partnership with a company called Atlas Space Operations, they're kind of a ground station as a service type of company. So what they do is they work with a lot of folks that have satellites in the air that are doing Earth observation or climate, those types of things that require downlinks from polar orbits. And they basically sell them time on their antenna system. And then we further facilitate that by connecting their antenna systems to fiber and ultimately down to the internet peering points in the lower 48. So that is underway as we speak. We're looking for a ready for service date December of this year, and we're pretty excited about that. That's kind of some new ground, and I think there's likely going to be some application for high latitude ground stations, more than we've seen to date. So, for example, there's an island north of Norway called Svalbard, Svalbard is it's a home of KSAT, which is a satellite ground station operator that has been around for decades, but they really came into prominence maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when they got fiber. They went from an antenna farm of like 7 antennas to 100 or more. Much of those are U.S. government type installations, NASA, NOAA, the other 3-letter agencies. And they essentially using those ground stations to take polar orbit data downloads onto Norwegian soil. And we're thinking that doing that at a high latitude with fiber on U.S. soil might be something that's attractive to U.S. government, Department of Defense, et cetera. So that's kind of an exciting direction that we're going as well. I think we can go to the next one.
Hey, Jomo, I had a quick question.
Yes, sir. Please, Representative Hopkins.
Thank you. And thank you, sir, for coming in and talking to us today. You had talked about the 505-mile line you've laid to Fairbanks, which I assume at this point is accessible for companies to tap into. What does the process look like for new and small companies wanting to access your 30 terabytes that's coming to Fairbanks? And who are you currently working with in the Fairbanks area to deliver that to residential customers?
Well, we have a small group of customers. I mentioned most of them to you earlier in the call already, but it's Alaska Communications, Telalaska, Aztec, ASRC Federal, and DRS. We also have deals in place with Internet 2 and GCI as well. So we did not focus on anything specifically in Fairbanks, because the major retail players are there already with capacity. So if I'm wrong in that, hey, I'm open to have the conversation with really any qualified local exchange company or a partner that has a distribution network. We're wide open to that. But we had not focused on Fairbanks in particular. We had focused on more of the markets that are landing stations.
So
basically, really based on the fact that there was no broadband there on the northwest and north slope on the coast. But go ahead.
interesting. So thank you. So if I were me, Grier, and I wanted to start up Grier's internet service to Fairbanks, what would be my ability to call you up and say, I want to buy some of your bandwidth and then build out my wireless distribution system here in Fairbanks?
You could just do that. We could start that conversation. We would, obviously we'd get non-disclosure agreements in place. We'd discuss a master service agreement. We'd look at, how our, what kind of compatibilities we had between the companies. I mean, I would want to make sure that whoever it was could, was in good standing and could pay their bills. And you'd want to know that I could deliver the service on time and in a quality manner. We can start that conversation anytime you like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't have an internet company. I'm just curious, but I appreciate that. Thank you. That's good to know.
If I may, Mac, I want to lob one question out. It's been in the chat box. You don't have to answer it right now, but I wanted to keep it in mind. With COVID and the amounts of children, families who are home doing online coursework, how do we reach all students so they all have access to online schooling cheaply and or affordably? So I think that's that integration question.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. We've had it for several months now. What we did back in mid-March when COVID really tightened its grip on everything, we offered additional bandwidth to each of our customers. So, for example, we went to Aztec, and Aztec has a fairly good amount of our bandwidth, both on the symmetrical and asymmetrical, in both of those versions. And we provided, I forget whether it was 400 or 600 megs of additional bandwidth, so that they could utilize that without, we didn't charge them anything for it. And, basically made that available to them for as long as they wanted. Same with ACS and Telalaska. So, the issue there, the problem is that I think you've seen a lot of universal service access funding coming into the state to support services to schools and libraries and hospitals and what we'd call anchor institutions. But no one really ever contemplated that we were going to experience a pandemic and people were going to be working from and schooling from home. So how do you get that additional bandwidth to those homes? So what we tried to do again was make it simple and reasonable for our partners to do that, and folks took different approaches to that. And I think we need to look at, in some areas, there's a lot of opportunity for fixed wireless broadband for folks to start up companies and partner with somebody like us. So their backhaul piece, which is typically the most expensive and most complicated piece of starting up one of those businesses, is already in place. And then we can look at, delivering services vis-a-vis available spectrum that's in the area, whether it's that FCC priority spectrum that was made available to the native villages and tribes in the lower 48, or other spectrum like white space and CBRS that's lightly licensed. So I think distribution and access networks are the key to all of that, and they have to get better. And I think wireless and what the FCC is doing has been a really good thing in that regard. So we'll see. I mean, it's a process. It's going to take some time to fully propagate, but I think we're moving in the right direction. That answer?
I was going to say, certainly it's nice to hear that you all did step up. It's appreciated.
Yeah, we did. We've still got, we may have to step up some more. I mean, who knows, what's going to go on this fall? Are we going to have another wave? And how do we react to that? I don't know. We'll be close to it, and we'll continue to, have regular conversations with our partners, and whatever they need, we'll be there to support that. We've also, Joe, I think I mentioned to you that, this was intended to be just really an introductory conversation. I'm happy to, follow up on this and send some additional information out to folks. But, we back when COVID first hit, we anticipated that there may be some funding sources that were available to continue to build infrastructure. And so we put together a white paper that would describe how you utilize the Quintillion infrastructure at each of these cable landing stations and our repeater stations down the terrestrial network, and then go ahead and build wireless aggregation points from there and deliver a fixed wireless broadband service, call it a 100-mile radius from each of our cable landing stations. So I'm happy to send that to you for further distribution. It's one where we were actually looking for and needing funding sources, because the economics are just very difficult in areas where it's very expensive to build. The population's fairly lean and it's not concentrated. So those are all factors that make a business case very difficult. But if there's some infrastructure dollars available to tap into on a federal or state level, this is a fairly low capex way to do that and deliver some pretty robust broadband services using existing spectrum. So
Alaskans outside of Anchorage aren't unfamiliar with challenged economies of scale. Well, Mr. Mack, we have kind of derailed you from your presentation. Do you want to keep walking through? But we can always take questions as we go.
covered most of it. I think you can jump to the next slide. I'll see if there's anything that I didn't touch on that I should. The strategic interest, I think, looking at us building out these ground station capabilities would be, they're very good for the markets, for Barrow, for example, but Point Hope as well. It's got a high latitude, and we can look at building ground station capabilities there. We're going to continue to push on phase 2 and phase 3. We think those are important things, and in all of those, Alaska is really the kind of fulcrum to all of this. So we're keeping an eye on and keeping our feet firmly planted in Alaska, as the core of our business. But then from there, expanding out, reaching to Asia, and reaching to Europe as well. And we'll continue to be working with government and Department of Defense, and there's obviously lots of discussion going on with what's happening with Russia, what's happening with China, what's happening with sea lanes, opening areas of commerce and so on. And we're going to be positioned pretty well, I think, to support those needs from our federal government.
Mac, we have a question from Mr. David Guttenberg, former representative, and Broadband was his baby. So please, Rep. Guttenberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mac. Thanks for being here. And, I've been following Quintillion. I've been in your office in Anchorage having some discussions, and thank you for stepping up when you came on board. My discussion with various wholesale providers has been one of the problematic conditions for entry into broadband is the cost of basically, I think in Seattle, when the broadband hits there, that there are that there's costs affiliated with that. And I've always wondered how much smoke I was being shown as just something to diffuse my efforts. So when let's say somebody comes in and a small broadband provider here with you, and your charges for that provider when it hits the transportation costs, is there an additional cost when it hits the hub in the States?
Typically, no. And if it is, it's very, very low, right? So, but let me try to break down the network aspects of it. So Quintillion's network, if we go back to the map, can we do that, Jomo? Go back to that map real quick. So that in the red, from Nome over to Prudhoe Bay and then down to Fairbanks, that in and of itself is about a $300 million investment, right? So, and to put it in perspective for you, that line, that phase 2 line from Tokyo back to Ocean Shores is going to come in at less than 150 million, right? So that's half the cost of what that 1,000-mile route or 1,500-mile route in Alaska, because of shallow water, because of landings and that type of thing. So very, very expensive. But once you get to Fairbanks and then down into the lower 48, there are multiple systems in place. There's a lot of traffic being aggregated through those routes, and so the cost, and then the cost once you get down into the lower 48, I've seen prices on a satellite basis or on the Terra network of $2,000 to $4,000 a meg. That same service in the lower 48 is like $1 a meg. So you do have some additional cost. It's when I first came here, I had all my paradigms and all my cost models all filed away nicely and neatly in my head, and that's from doing networks in all sorts of rural environments throughout the lower 48, and Alaska's 10 times the cost that you typically see in the lower 48. So there's definitely challenges there. But again, I think your question was, how much does the transit from in the lower 48 contribute to the cost, and I would tell you that it's really not much. It's probably sub $1 a meg. And first, David, let me ask, did I answer your question, or was that?
Well, let me. So specifically, that when the fiber hit Seattle, there was a significant cost to hooking up the charge. Like there was a tariff, right? You're hooking in, and now we're going to charge you for hooking into these trunk lines. Is that just basically is not real? It's just another cost, and it's not significant.
That doesn't sound real to me. No, it doesn't. I think that there's if you're talking about connecting into the Westin building in Seattle, which is the main carrier hotel, you have options there that are numerous and really high quality and very low cost. So, yeah.
So I appreciate that. I've been in your facility in Barrow, Ukjavik, expecting to see, I don't know what I expected, but there it was, just coming out of the ground, and your facility there, inside looking at the boards and the switches was pretty impressive, but very Alaskan at the same time. So thank you.
All right. Do we have any further questions?
I'm seeing a low Earth orbit question there. Something just flashed on the screen.
Oh.
And when we have an opportunity, Jomo, I wanted to go back to David's discussion, if possible.
Well, actually, why don't you go ahead and continue with David's discussion, and then we'll ask the next question.
All right, thanks. So this is Doug Isaacson again. So Michael, I work with the native village of Minto. And in the conversations that we have, if I want 3 megabytes from, say, GCI, robust, ringed, resilient, it's going to cost $5,000 plus, over $5,000. And if I want the same with DRS, it's going to be maybe a couple thousand cheaper, and actually they'll give 10 megs, but not resilient, in the sense of there's no redundancy. There's if it goes down, it goes down, and then UUI, it's even a whole lot cheaper. It comes down to hundreds of dollars instead. So David's question, as I heard it, was talking about those additional fees. You were saying, 1 meg for $1 or whatever, and here it is, thousands of dollars. Is that because of economies of scale, because of the equipment that costs that these companies bear in building out their systems, or is it just a matter of how they pay their own bills internally? In your estimation, what should be the price for, the GNOME example that you gave, 25.5? I mean, that would urban scale internet could revolutionize rural Alaska. And if it's being impeded just by, somebody wanting to take advantage of government funding, let's say, well, the tribes can go out and get government funding, so let's drive up the cost. I don't know. I'm very intrigued by that interchange between you and David.
Yeah, well, it's a complicated set of issues. I mean, think about it like this. So you have core networks, you have transport networks, and you have access networks. All right. And so the core network is when you look at the lower 48, just pick the major cities, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Dallas, et cetera, and you've got huge economies of scale between those markets. And therefore, you've got a lot of competition in there, and you've got a lot of capacity, and the prices per meg have been just going south for a long time at this point. So put that aside for a second, then go to distribution network. A distribution network is what you see on this map here from from Seattle or Oregon, say, up into Anchorage and Fairbanks, and then into the slope. That's a distribution network. And then the access networks are what Alaska Communications and GCI and Aztec provide, whether it's copper and it's DSL, or it's hybrid fiber coax, which is typical for the cable companies to use, that kind of thing. And I think for the most part, and you've got satellite as well, and they're all pricing their services based on, a cost basis. Now I think there has been, I've seen some numbers that just sort of blow me away. We've got to publish our numbers, and we're straight across the board. We really don't look at we'll look at doing individual case-based pricing if we can reduce the price, but never to increase the price. So we have our rack rates, our wholesale rack rates, both for symmetrical service and asymmetrical service in all of our markets. All of our providers basically have the same rates. It really, their discounts depend on their volume and the term commitments that they make on services. But in the case of something like Minto, if there's a problem that we need to try to solve, that there isn't an existing player in place that's partnered with us, we can look at that and try to figure out, working with DRS or somebody like that, try to figure out how to get that redundant service, a redundant resilient service into the Minto area at an affordable rate. So I don't have the answer for you right now, but I'm definitely open to having that conversation and seeing if there's a way for us to figure that out, and work with the folks at DRS all the time on various things, and they're good people to work with. So
great. I'll Jomo posted your email, so I'll email you today. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mac. Thanks a lot, Doug, and you too, David. We have another question here. Let's see. How does the low Earth orbit efforts of SpaceX and OneWeb, along with MTA's terrestrial connection to Canada, impact your strategic planning going forward?
Okay,
so would this be satellite integration?
Well, both. I mean, the SpaceX, OneWeb deals they're very interesting to us. We're working with SpaceX. As a matter of fact, I've got a call with them this afternoon, because we can help provide them, some of the ground space operations, and also fiber transport, because they're going to need that. OneWeb, we were looking at doing the same thing. So I look at both OneWeb and SpaceX as they can be competitive, but we can also look at them as a complement. I think that there's some very remote areas that satellite's always going to have a leg up on fiber, and then there's the capacity issues and redundancy and resiliency issues where fiber is a better solution than satellite. So I think coexisting, those systems coexisting along with microwave, is the best thing that could happen to Alaska. I mean, the issue is, let's get broadband further, deeper, less expensive, and higher levels of bandwidth, however we can, as long as it's a quality installation. So I look at them as let's call it co-opetition. On the MTA, MTA to us is another route out of Alaska that should make the networks more resilient and robust. So we work with the folks at MTA frequently as well. So I don't see them as threats. I see this as a scenario where the power and value of a network is directly proportional to the number of participants in that network. So I'm for let's all lean in, work together, and not if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if everything has to get solved by fiber, there's big segments of the market that won't ever be able to take advantage of that. Same with if everything was microwave, you'd lose out. If everything was satellite, you'd lose out. So I think all three need to work together. And, I'm open to that, open to those discussions and partnerships. And, we work with the folks at PDI as well. So we're constantly trying to figure out ways where we can work together and make 1 + 1 equal 3. And so that's kind of the mentality, at least here at Quintillion. I mean, there's some players in the market that may not agree with that and want to be more self-centric. But we're not one of those. We think that partnering is the right way to go.
All right, let's zip on through.
I think these are just so everybody knows. I mean, we are financed by Cooper Investment Partners. They're a private equity firm out of New York. They're probably in 90%. The remainder of the ownership of the company is with Alaska Native Corps. We are owned and operated. It's all, we're very sensitive to federal government and doing business according to the rules, so to speak. And so, our investors are U.S. citizens. We have service award management documentation in place, all of our DUNS and cage numbers and so on. We did a DISA basic agreement. So that's a Department of Defense. That's their buying arm for our telecommunications and broadband services. We did that about a little over a year ago. And we have GSA as well. So all of those items are in place. We are qualified, certified as Team Telcom. So we don't have any Chinese equipment in the network, foreign investment in the network, anything like that. So again, that's really important for where we're going with the federal government and again to the ground station operations direction and so on. We can go to the management team. I think the thing to point out here is we just hired 2 strategic advisors that are former 4-star generals that are one's a classmate and one is a 1 year separate from George. George is a retired Army officer. He got medically retired a while back, and J.C. Campbell and Chuck Jacoby are both, like I said, they're contemporaries of his. We know them well, and they're helping us, work through the channels of the federal government and understand, how to best leverage the infrastructure that we have in place and what we have planned, to help in, defense and Earth observation, climate issues, and so on and so forth. So that's our story.
Well, that was a question I had, Mac. You mentioned capacity and that the amount of capacity you have available is far in excess of what we use on a normal basis here in Alaska. But I was wondering if that included the military, and it also included what appears to be soon to be an up tempo of their usage.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The military, they have large needs. The chicken and the egg aspect is what they typically look for is, if you've got the network in place, like for example, if we had Thule to Elictoc Point in place, they'd likely be signing orders with us currently. But the issue is they don't typically initiate that. So we have to figure out a business case that includes other entities that are be interested in that route as well. But once we're committed to that route, then they sort of jump in, and we're talking about tens and hundreds of gigs of capacity for some of these applications. But that still leaves again significant. We're talking about a network in Alaska that's 90 terabytes. So again, I use the example of carrying all the traffic sent and generated from Alaska, but it could, essentially do much more than that. So So I think capacity is going to be the least of our worries for a long time to come in Alaska. And if we get to the point where that becomes an issue, it's a good problem for us to have. There'll be a lot more investment eager to be made in Alaska.
So, Mac, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate question, but it has popped up, so I'll ask. The questioner asks, I've heard varying numbers on how many fibers are in the cables you've run.
Subsea or
do you all actually disclose how many fibers?
Yeah. Subsea or terrestrial? Is that
I'm
question?
assuming subsea.
Subsea, it's 3 pairs. 3 pairs of fiber. 3 pairs.
Oh, okay.
And so let me kind of explain the difference when you're looking at a terrestrial network. The fiber count is really incremental, right? So like in our terrestrial network from a Licktock Point down to Fairbanks, we have 96 fibers in that. Subsea, based on the nature of how complicated those actual cables are, fiber pairs are at a premium, right? So you essentially build and optimize those fiber pairs, and you don't typically put in a lot of extras. Like, so for example, in our system from Japan to Washington State, that will be either a 6 or 8 pair system. And if you added and made it 12 pairs or 18 pairs, your cost does not go up incrementally. It goes up. It's just geometric. Which is not the case on a terrestrial network. So really, those subsea cables are highly optimized for huge bandwidth. Like we'll be looking at either a 13 or an 18 terabit per fiber pair system from Japan to Washington State. The system that we're currently in phase 1, that's been optimized for 10 terabits per fiber pair, but can be increased. So hopefully that answers the question. It's 3 pair on the existing subsea and 96 on the terrestrial.
Thank you. Okay. So we had gotten to.
I think that's.
Right. I did want to bring up this last slide because it does include contact information.
Yeah,
Well,
I really appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. I hope the introduction was at least reasonable and brought up some good food for thought. I am available to talk to anybody about whatever issues that you'd like to talk about. I mean, furthering our business purpose is critically important. We also keep in mind, as a wholesaler, it's kind of a slippery slope for us to go outside of that wholesale relationship and because your guys that are actually retailing don't appreciate sometimes you talking to their end users, talking to their customers. So it's one where we're trying to respect that wholesale relationship, but also, we have to figure out ways to get this network and get this capacity distributed as much as we possibly can. So, and for, good affordable prices. So that's what's most important. That's a priority for us. And that's what I'm looking to do. So I hope the phone rings, and I hope there's some ideas. And like I said, we'll be creative, and we'll also be direct. I mean, if it's something we can't do, rather than waste time, I'll just tell you. And if it's something we can, let's go to work. Let's roll our sleeves up and have some fun.
Well, Mr. McHale, I did want to say thank you very much for this presentation. And just so you know, on the direct communications, you've been getting rave reviews. So thank you very much. As an introductory presentation, this was fabulous.
Very good.
If I may ask a question, so it does sound like we Alaskans have work to do. Again, you've provided the superhighway for wholesale use, but now we have to figure out how to get the feeder lines in, the way the ways to connect to that system to fully utilize it. Whom would you recommend I maybe do a follow-up or call or few to start trying to figure out how what are those bugs and how we as Alaskans can start working them out?
There's a group that I would recommend, and let me give you a quick little background on it before I name them. We looked at doing a pretty big RUS grant for a build down the Aleutian chain, and we did that in like December, January, and February of this year. And it just turned out it was just too expensive. It was about a $90 million project, and we just couldn't make the numbers tie out. But in that process, we learned a lot, and we partnered with a group out of Dutch Harbor, and the company was called Optimera, and they do fixed wireless broadband, and they seem to really have a pretty good handle on it. And they might be a good group to talk to about, how you can combine fiber with fixed wireless broadband and, deliver a robust service into a rural, sparsely populated area. They might be, and the CEO's name is Emmett Fitch, a really, really good guy, a lifelong Alaskan. And I think you'd find their business model interesting.
Hey, thank you. We do have one more question. Rep. Guttenberg, you're up.
Thank you. Sorry to well, I have a lot of questions, a lot of statements, but just give a figurative world. Let's say, and this happens around the country, the borough or the electric utility, we have electric co-op here, through USDA and other grants, gets grants to basically cover the cost of the capital to go FTTH, fiber to the home, and hook up with you. So the capital for expansion was in place. What would you project, or just off the top of your head, the cost and the speed would be for residents here?
All right, are you talking about a specific market?
Well, yeah, let's say Fairbanks, right? So with 100,000 people, there's 40,000 meters in the under Golden Valley. Say the pickup rate is 25%, so it's about 10 or 15,000 people. The capital cost is covered by grants, so that wouldn't be part of it. What would the cost that you would be projecting to charge? Or even, let's say the borough or Golden Valley goes into partnership with you to do that. Well, off the top of your head, where the capital costs were insignificant and you're only charging maintenance and replacement costs and stuff like that, what would you see the cost would be?
Yeah, I could tell you. So first really important thing to note is your notion that the CapEx would be covered, right? If the CapEx for the local distribution is all covered, then I would tell you that you ought to be able to get service to a consumer or a small business at a 25 meg. If you're on a typical and traditional telephone company line, a DSL line, you're probably gonna top out at 25, maybe 50 megs. It really depends on your distance from a central office. If you're using a coax or hybrid fiber coax system, you could probably get a little more out of it than that 50 megs, up to 100 even. And your cost ought to be $100 a month, $150 a month in that situation. And the reason why I say that those numbers, we looked at doing that using a fixed wireless play in a smaller market, and with with the capital not being an issue, the operating expense is really what you've got to pay attention to. And if you've got a reasonable penetration rate, and I think you mentioned like 25% of the population of the homes, you should be able to come in at that $100-$150 range pretty easily.
All right.
Well,
Well, again,
also tell you that if you look at Nome has got services from like the $100 level up to $300-$350 level. And one thing to note is there's no data caps on any of that. And that's so some providers they provide the service and you get a certain speed, but then you get, they start metering your usage. And so, your bill can be, far in excess of what you think you're paying for the actual line.
yes, I had that happen a Christmas before last with my children and their little devices.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that get surprised like that. And our take is, we like to see no caps on data, especially when it's connected to our system, because we can open that pipe up and let people take full advantage of it without worrying about, I can only watch 6 Netflix movies this month, and then the clock starts ticking and the meter starts ticking, right? You shouldn't really have to do that. But,
yeah, I didn't realize both of my kids had Netflix on their computers, and both were binge watching different things. It was extraordinary. Well, again, Mr. McHale, thank you so much. I will probably have some other questions coming in, and we'll forward them along if I do, and would love to have you all back for another presentation in the future as we see how your plans and your project progress. Thank you so much.
take care. Thank you.
All right, well, everybody, we're about done for today. Just a little heads up on next week's presentation. Next week we have on docket Mr. Mead Treadwell regarding the Alaska to Alberta Railway. So again, we will have a meeting next week, A2A. Also, you probably saw it in my notice. I hope I put in the notice. In follow-up on the census presentation, again, please tell everyone you know, if they haven't taken the census yet or responded yet, please encourage them to do so. 10 questions, 10 minutes, but 10 years of either beneficial or substandard impact. And I believe those are the only things I have at this moment. Finally, no. I believe the borough's CARES program is supposed to be going active today, or certainly very soon. So if you, your business, or if the business of anyone you know needs some kind of COVID assistance, relief assistance, there's a new offering becoming available. Again, the city's on their phase 2. The state has made amendments to make theirs a bit more liberalized. There's still some federal assistance, I believe, but finally, again, the borough is coming online. So please don't sit in the cold if you don't have to, or certainly encourage businesses or your business friends to take a look-see. All right, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your week. And of course, Mac, happy birthday, boss. All right, talk to you next week, everybody.